Welcome to Kiffin's Keep, an intellectual resource for the pillar and buttress of the truth, which is the church. This is a project of the London Lyceum, which is all about serious thinking for a serious church. And what else do I say? I'm president of the London Lyceum and host of Kiffin's Keep. And as always, I'm excited to be here with you all today. And today I'm here live with who knows how many people joining. We'll find out. This should be an interesting episode. So the way I've done this is my first live, episode ever. And the whole point of it is to celebrate 5 years of the London Lyceum. So we've been doing this for 5 years. We've added and grown quite a bit. And tomorrow will be the 5-year anniversary. So I thought, well, let's just take a whirl and take a swing at who knows what. So I don't know what's going to happen here. We're going to find out. I do have some questions that have already been submitted to me, but if you're watching this live, you're welcome to drop a comment into the little channel here and I can address that. So this will be unique in the sense that I don't really know what questions are coming, though I did see a couple of them just recently. So I can start with those, and we'll see how this goes. So you're in for it as much as I am. So one of the questions that was asked that I think is a nice place to start is how has your creation and stewardship of the London Lyceum over the past 5 years shaped your understanding of the nature and future of Christian institutions? And I think that's a really good question, and it's a nice one to lead with because it has shaped my vision and changed my thoughts on it and given me an imagination for what's possible and the future opportunities that exist for current existing institutions, small growing institutions, and all of them in between. And I think one of the things that I take away is that I think there's a lot of opportunity and excitement to be had in this moment. Yes, there's a lot of fracturing and a lot of breaking of institutions, and yet there's also a tremendous opportunity to grow and develop and create new ones. And I think there's just lots of opportunities. And so that's one thing that I really take away from the experience that I've had over the last 5 years is just there's opportunities to really build some cool things that can serve people, that can help people, that can do a lot of great stuff. Um, it also has shaped, when you think about institutions, it's all about the people. It's all about the friendships and relationships that you make. And those institutions that prioritize people and know how to build friendships and relationships are the ones that are going to make an impact and last long term. I mean, for example, us, we've never paid anybody 1 cent for being on staff with the London Lyceum. All of our staff people are here purely on a voluntary basis because they believe in the mission. And I don't think you get that without, number one, having a clear, distinct, compelling vision, but also having a group of people that are just friends and then collaborate and help each other and push back on each other and ask questions and challenge one another. So those are a couple of things I would say on that front. Other questions that have come in, some of it has to do with the podcast. So, I mean, naturally, we started as a podcast 5 years ago. That's the only thing we started as. And over time, we've added on additional things. And two of the questions, the first one is what's one topic or author you'd love to do an episode on or with? And to be honest with you, I think we've really been able to interview pretty much all of my heroes. I mean, there's some people that I think that I might not have interviewed yet that would classify in that category. I mean, like Alvin Plantiga would be an awesome person to interview. Who else could be awesome? We've mentioned Paul Helm in the past. People like that would be really cool to interview. But I mean, one of our first big interviews, I think people like Oliver Crisp came on the show, and others who we had profound respect for and have learned from and been able to engage with and have been able to have on the podcast. So, I mean, we've really had amazing number of guests on the podcast from all sorts of walks of life, backgrounds, and it's been awesome. The other question is that the London Lyceum is Baptist, Analytic, and Confessional, though this person who sent this question got it backwards. That's BAC. It's supposed to be ABC, so it's easy to remember, right? But as far as content and vibe goes, has one of those descriptors become more dominant than you anticipated as you've added on writers, thinkers, etc.? Or have they all worked pretty naturally in tandem? I tend to think they've all worked nicely in tandem. Now, not everybody has the same skill set. We have a lot of people who they just like Baptist history stuff, and so that's why they follow us, or they like the philosophy, analytic theology sort of stuff, and that's why they stick around and they hop around between the sort of content that we provide. But I think a lot of it goes together. I mean, we've done a lot of material that connects these dots, or tries to connect the dots And I think it's cool because while there's a lot of people who don't have experience in one or the other, they're able to sort of cross pollinate and ask questions and become stronger in their understanding of different things than they would have otherwise. So I think it's a really strong, I don't know, I mean, we've created an intellectual culture where we have the opportunity to engage differing viewpoints and differing ideas, and I think that's pretty special. I'm running through these questions faster than I anticipated. So if you're watching, you need to drop me a question so I have more stuff to talk about. Because if you don't, then I'm going to get stuck with the questions that people like Hunter Heinzman have sent me, and asking me about things that I don't want to go on the record on. I mean, I was talking to him about children's ministry, and I think my comment on it is I think you should get rid of children's ministry in the church, and that's because I think the example you have in the New Testament and later is just families together worshiping, and it also is a major headache to do children's ministry right. Because if you're going to do it, you need to do it right. Because there's a bunch of predators out there who want to steal children and do bad things to them, and so you have to prioritize and protect them at all costs, even if it's very difficult. You must do that if you're going to have a children's ministry. And so I think it's just why if you're already supposed to be worshiping as a family, why not just do that and make it much easier? I think churches should develop opportunities and rooms and different things to help with children who are truly being obstructive to be able to have a space that's not um, overly like judgmental or something that like oh your kid's acting up, but a space you can actually go, you can still hear the service or participate in some way. I think there's ways to mitigate the challenges there. Thanks, Elijah. Don't talk about youth ministry. Maybe I'll talk. Yeah, let's get rid of youth ministry. No, I'm kidding. I think there's value in, especially youth ministry, if done properly. It should never replace the worship service. So some of these churches have like separate worship services. That's really weird. They shouldn't do that. I think there's a ton of value in having teenagers being able to have adults who they can look at as moral exemplars to be able to say, I want to imitate them or learn from them. I think that's incredibly valuable for teenagers. And I mean, for really anybody, but especially teenagers, they need somebody they can look up to that makes wise, rational decisions that's not just their parents. So I'm in favor of some sort of youth ministry, maybe not the traditional form, but I am definitely in favor of it. I mean, my youth pastor, thinking back then, was one of the most influential and impactful people in my life. Spent more time than I can imagine at his house. Okay, so we've got some good questions in here. We've got one. What are some examples of dream publications or projects you would want the London Lyceum to pursue if given the opportunity? I mean, to some degree, we're already accomplishing some of our dream projects. I mean, our very first original volume for Hanover Press is going to be advice to Christian philosophers. So that releases December 2nd, and you can pre-order it now at our website. If you go to hanoverpress.com or if you go to the londonlyceum.com, you can either way you can find it there. And this features 24 essays, original essays from 24 of the leading philosophers, Christian philosophers in the country. So you have everyone from Peter Van Inwagen to Linda Zebzebski to Ross Inman to Charity Anderson to Greg Welty. I mean, you've got William Lane Craig all across the spectrum, theological spectrum, reflecting on Alvin Plantinga and his seminal essay in the last 40 years of Christian philosophy. I mean, the fact that we're publishing this level of quality of material already out of the gate, evidence is number one, trust in what we're doing, the process, but also is just really awesome. And what an opportunity. I mean, we just published the last issue of the Hanover Review with world-class scholars like Richard Cross in there. I mean, it's incredible what we're doing. I do think I'm excited about the opportunity to continue to develop and encourage more original theology that's philosophically informed properly and is engaging it in the proper way. I'm also excited about a lot of the Baptist and confessional and historical resources that we have ideas about that we're working towards. So I think we've got a lot of projects that we are excited about and that we're working towards, and we're hopeful that they will take flight. Oh, and the next question is similarly, what upcoming project from the London Lyceum excites me the most? Well, I think I mentioned one that we're releasing in December, the Advice to Christian philosophers, but I think we're working hopefully on the full 3 volume set of John Gill's unabridged body of doctrinal and practical divinity. I think that's going to be a tremendous resource. So one thing we're committed to when we're working with old sources is not just putting in a new typesetting. I think that's a necessary aspect of good publishing of old sources, but we're also doing the proper editorial work that goes along with it, the citation checking, all of the critical edition sort of stuff that you have to do for really lasting volumes. So we don't want to create volumes just to create money. We don't want to create volumes just for them to go in the dustbin in 5 years. We want to create lasting standard versions of somebody like John Gill. There's a lot of great Baptists in our tradition that I think we need to recover and retrieve and to hoist high. They have errors, they have faults, but we want to prioritize the fact that there have been Baptist theologians and Baptist pastor theologians in our history. And we don't have to just exclusively go to our neighbor's backyard to enjoy a feast. We also have one in our own backyard that we can invite our neighbors to, and then we can both enjoy each other's food and be able to learn and fellowship together. So I think there's a real opportunity to bring back some of these sources so that seminarians and pastors and churches can utilize these sources. And another question: it seems like a lot of formerly promising institutions and movements have lost their way or self-destructed. We live in contentious times. How do you build institutions that last? Hopefully, this isn't too spicy. Well, it can only be spicy if I name names. So if I don't name names, it'll never be that spicy. So we'll see what happens. But I do think, I think that the obvious examples of those that have fizzled are almost all of the young, restless, and reform stuff. The things that what is it, T4G, and these other things that have closed for whatever reason, whether that's because of just the increasing polarization, and so the sort of like centralized, we're all centered around these core commitments are no longer sufficient for collaboration or whatever it may be. Um, I think a lot of that, like T4G seems to me it to some degree destructed because of the increasing polarization. And so they tried to build it around something that was no longer sufficient. But there's also elements of things like that that were destroyed because of COVID. I think COVID ended one of those conferences. And when you lose, when it's already every other year, and then you lose one like that, it does significantly limit your momentum. And I do think the increasing polarization just naturally sort of like, okay, now's the time to pause, because obviously no conference or anything like that is forever. You never know how long it's going to last. And it was just kind of like, this is the time to end it. Now, other institutions, I'm trying to think of other ones that have died. And a lot of them seem to have been built around a dynamic personality. And if that dynamic personality is someone who ends up failing morally for some reason, then so does that institution. And so those institutions are built on basically sinking sand. If you want to have a long lasting institution, it cannot be built on one person. It must be built on multiple people who then continue to spread that and to ingrain the culture in others who are competent and equipped to lead themselves. And so if you have a leader who is very charismatic, but also is more of a dictator, my way or the highway, and gets yes men in there, if that guy leaves or fails, it's over. If you want to have a long lasting institution, you have to have free thinking individuals that are capable and skilled in their own rights. So any leader who's afraid of others, who might be more gifted than them, smarter than them, whatever have you, is going to ultimately build a very short lasting institution. If you want to build a long lasting one, you have to have people who are committed to sharing the load and sharing the spotlight and laboring together and being willing to have people who are smarter than them as part of the team. I think that probably answers that question. As far as other questions, keep sending them in if you have them. Let's see if there's any other ones that I've seen that come through here. Another one that's come through is, here we go. Here's a good one. You have a background in philosophy and produce philosophical content for the London Lyceum. Lyceum, I'm curious because it seems that while people and pastors may be familiar with theology proper, they may not be as well versed in philosophy proper. Yes, most of them are not well versed at all, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way it is. What kind of philosophical knowledge do you believe is most needed to better strengthen our theological projects, either in the church or in the academy? In other words, I wish more people would knew about X. So the reality is, most pastors know nothing about philosophy. So it's not hard to enhance that. Most people don't know anything about philosophy. So it's not just a slide on pass. It's just that's not something that's really taught anymore. And most people who engage philosophy, they catch on to some cool words and then just kind of like have 50-cent words and they want to repeat them. And they're not actually engaging the philosophical project, the philosophical life. So I would typically recommend some basic introductory texts for some of the major areas. So that would be things like metaphysics, epistemology, value theory. So that's going to be things like ethics or moral theology that goes in there. And then I'd probably, I mean, those would be the three things that I really want to pound home. Some introductory text on that, and then I'd probably have some introductory, like great works text, so that you have to engage with some of the important thinkers in the tradition that have ultimately been used and reused throughout the tradition. Because that's what, like, if you're even if you're a pastor, if you're working with any reform sources or anything, a lot of them oftentimes are utilizing various sources and you don't even know that they're using them. So if you've read a lot of these, you can start to pick up on some of the cues and some of the differences. Now, it's true, some of the reform sources, they're parroting these ideas and they have no idea that they come from X source. But it'll help you be able to identify them and understand sort of the shared language and the shared grammar that's being used. So being able to read things like Plato, things like Aristotle, going and picking up his categories, going and picking up his metaphysics or his physics and reading that through. Now, you probably need a reading group if you're going to make it through something like Aristotle. Plato's a little bit easier, more digestible, but I would start with those sort of things: metaphysics, epistemology, probably value theory, and then philosophy of mind would be another one that I'd probably want to pound home, especially given the nature of anthropology being one of the most important areas or questions of today, where people have thoughts that are crazy on this stuff. And it would really help, especially pastors, to have a good understanding of what's going on in anthropology. So, philosophy of mind is the branch of philosophy that would be covering that. And I think it would be very, very helpful to have some introductory texts on that. Now, do, a lot of people don't have time to really fully invest in the philosophical training that's necessary to be understand how it all works, but at least those introductory texts would give you some sort of framework and lay of the land to think about things. And then I think there's important institutions that will hopefully offer sort of like guided reading courses or groups that are affordable or accessible that you can then take the next step. So, for example, I've been talking with our philosophy director. He's going to be leading a reading group this fall through Ross Inman's new What is Reality? It's an introduction to metaphysics book. It's going to be like 5 90-minute meetings, I think. Maybe it's 6 meetings. I don't know. To work through that text and to have some supplementary text. And Matt's going to be having like outlines and all sorts of stuff. That is a tremendous opportunity to say, let me get my feet wet into some of these things to helpfully understand properly how that's all working. Now, the academic needs to spend more time than the pastor on this. So I think any academic, I mean, if you go back in church history, you look at the theologians, the greatest theologians, and the way that they were trained, the way they were reformed, they knew philosophy. Contemporary theologians don't know philosophy. And a lot of them get introduced to it, they get really excited about it, but they haven't actually spent the time to study it or understand it. And that's a real detriment to their ability to produce the highest quality theology. Philosophy is supposed to be a handmaiden. It's always been in that role in the Christian tradition. And so you want to have the best handmaiden that you possibly can have. And so I think you need to spend time studying philosophy, educating yourself as much as you can. And so that's one of the things I think we bring a lot of value as an organization. There's not a lot of institutions that are Christian that are providing these sort of resources, that are encouraging thinking in these ways. It's not just an ancillary project for us. It's one of the core parts of our mission to be doing this sort of philosophical theology to help people to think about these topics. Another one that's come through is, since we're Baptists and we love Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong, why should I give to the London Lyceum or other institutions rather than a missionary? Saying this is a small donor, I intend this as a softball. I guess I wasn't supposed to read that out loud, but here I am. So, why donate to our organization? Well, I think we have a very niche mission that you aren't going to find in other places. And so, if you believe in our mission, then naturally there's not going to be a lot of places that are doing what we're doing to donate to. But why not, these other groups? I mean, the reality is we need healthy institutions across the board. We need healthy missionaries. We need strong missionaries to go plant churches. But we also need organizations and institutions that help form strong missionaries and that help form strong pastors, that help encourage rural pastors that are in the middle of nowhere, that don't have a community, that don't have friendship, that are lonely and need help, or to form and help pastors that have a lot of relationships, but they don't have sort of like the academic community and the push to say, you don't actually know everything you think you do. It's good to sit back in humility and realize you don't know it all. And so from those perspectives, I think our organization is very, very helpful because we can actually provide useful resources in those ways. So our group right now, our leadership group, is working on a white paper, and we'll announce that sometime next year, but it's designed to be a resource to aid churches and pastors. We're trying proactively to create academic resources to support and encourage the church, but also to encourage sort of an ecosystem of intellectual Protestant development. So we don't need to have the Roman Catholics who have all the intellectual development and intellectual ecosystems and institutions. We want to have Protestants and Baptists who also have these sorts of things. And so if you believe that these things matter and that they're valuable, then you should give and donate to the London Lyceum. And I think you just look at our resources, what we've been doing. I mean, the encouragement that we've created through the podcast, the encouragement we've created through the journal, the encouragement we've created through our online essays, which get an incredible amount of traction that I'm always shocked and surprised by to some degree. So, I mean, if you've been encouraged by our resources, helped, challenged, pushed, and maybe you realize that you want to ask new questions, or maybe you think you don't know all the answers, that's good. That's part of the mission. Or you've been introduced to John Gill or Andrew Fuller or all these other resources. I think that's a great reason to say, support the London Lyceum, support Hanover Press and what they're doing and trying to build and accomplish, because what we're trying to build and accomplish is not currently there. We need more people that are committed to these sort of things. How is working for the London Lyceum stretched you, whether in skills, knowledge, or other areas? Well, this is the last question because my infant is awake, so I will try to answer this briefly as I can. And I would say it's stretched me because it's challenged me and given me the opportunity to engage all sorts of different people. I get to think and talk and engage with all sorts of people that I would have never had the opportunity to engage with and have conversations with. And so I can have my ideas pushed and challenged. And I think that's awesome. I've gained a lot of knowledge in Baptist history. I've gained a lot of knowledge in various areas of philosophy and theology that I never would have had access to because I'm interviewing guests on stuff that I never knew existed, and I'm learning all about it all the time. Same thing with the essays. I'm learning to be a better editor. I'm learning to be more confident and ask the right sort of questions and to understand how to help people become better writers and communicators themselves. So there's a lot of things that I've learned, and I'm really thankful for it. This has been a great journey, and I'm excited for what we have in the future, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years. We've got several really exciting projects that we're working on right now that I'm pumped about. Now, I didn't get to answer everything, I imagine, so hopefully this was helpful. We have another live Q&A tomorrow with quite a few of the London Lyceum guys, so if you had other questions or thoughts, make sure to attend that as well. We're going to stream that live to several different sources. So I appreciate you all tuning in, and I look forward to thinking with you all soon.